my computer would not boot up. Melanie, so happy to see you.
It's great to see you. We need to catch up one of our lengthy lunches. Yeah.
Oh yeah, we need a lengthy lunch for sure.
Oh yeah. After I get off this call, I'm emailing.
All right, perfect.
Email you. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you.
Right.
Well,
welcome everybody. This is our this time monthly meeting of our Legislative Affairs Committee. My co-chair Bill Wishman sends his regards. He unfortunately had a conflict come up just yesterday. So Melanie, he's sorry he can't join us today and looks forward to seeing you at some other point. In the interest of time, we will not go around individually and introduce ourselves. But if you would take those three little dots at the top of your right-hand side and put the name of your organization behind your name, then our guests can see where everybody is from. And of course, we're all getting used to Jerry's amazing AI note keeper. So you may have seen that note pop up as well. We meet monthly at this point, although starting in January, we will have weekly meetings. And our goal is, of course, to get you out in about 45 minutes. So, Brian, any other housekeeping announcements before we introduce our guest officially?
Yeah, thank you. I did want to mention we do have two more committee meetings. The Chamber has three committees. We have infrastructure and land use, we have economic development, and then we have legislative affairs, which is today. We do have a couple more committee meetings scheduled for calendar year 2023. On December 12th, the Infrastructure and Land Use Committee will host Will Pines, who is the new State Highways Administrator. So very anxious to hear what he has to say about his role, and also, of course, some of the things going on with the American Legion Bridge and the 495-270 project. And then on December 14th, this committee will meet its last time in calendar year 23. And that meeting will feature John Steerhoff, who's on the call, and our lobbyists from the local and state level going to tell you more about what they see in 2024. So that's now our annual rite of passage from the old year into the new year, is hearing from our lobbyists about what they see in their crystal ball. So thanks, Leslie.
Great, thank you. So we're so pleased this morning to welcome Melanie Wenger to join us. Melanie is let me make sure if I get your title, Director of Intergovernmental Relations for Montgomery County, and we'll let her explain more fully. I think the way I take that is that she has, if any of you have had those sort of straight line, dotted line, multiple reportings, Melanie is in that category of people who have multiple bosses. And it'll be interesting to hear her perspective on that role. Melanie did not provide a bio for us. So first thing I'm going to ask you, Melanie, is tell us a little bit about your background, how you ended up in this job, because I don't imagine that this is one of those positions that people are sitting in elementary school and at career day saying, I want to grow up to be a lobbyist. So how did you end up in this role and in this role for us in Montgomery County?
So I think that is exactly right, Leslie. In fact, I wouldn't have thought this for long past grade school. For a position like this, oddly, I have my master's degrees in finance. So was living in California, gonna go to graduate school in California, came back to the DC area, went to graduate school here, and thought I would live, in the world of business, and actually had an option on a business here in Annapolis, and decided not to exercise that option, and went like, well, I should do some interviewing because I haven't interviewed for a while. I pick up the newspaper, and there's an interview opportunity for the Maryland General Assembly for their nonpartisan staffing agency. When John remembers this, it was still fiscal services and legislative reference. And I went like, well, I would certainly never work for the public sector. But I haven't interviewed for a while, so I'll just do this for interview practice, where it turns out I met some very, very interesting people. And it sounded to me like it was kind of a small consulting shop to the legislature. I didn't even know who my elected officials were. I didn't know anything about the organization of Maryland State Legislature. I'm from Kansas, lived in Florida, came here from California, and ended up working for fiscal services before that organization was reformed into kind of one larger organization called the Department of Legislative Services. I staffed financial committees, so the House Appropriations Committee, then moved over to the Senate Budget and Tax Committee. So you can see I kind of have a money background. And then got the opportunity to be the Senate President's Chief of Staff. That was Mike Miller, and John was his first Chief of Staff. So I had known John for a very, very long time with my career in the legislature. And then got the opportunity to work for Doug Duncan in his last term of office as a Montgomery County executive, and then ended up staying on throughout Ike Leggett's term, and now Mark Elrich's second term. So yeah, a strange turn of events, but this is how I think if you look at people's careers, lots of times this is the way they kind of trip into things that end up making sense for them. So that's the background. And also for those of you who are kind of not familiar with how Montgomery County works, I don't know why you would be, except for a few of you that I know have known for a long time and have probably heard this spiel. The Office of Intergovernmental Relations in Montgomery County is unique in the state for a county advocacy shop that my office represents both the executive and legislative branches. Most times when you see a lobbying shop and a county government, they're only representing the executive branch. But that is unique in the state to Montgomery County. The reason they do that, they think that if you get split positions on things, you're less effective. So, we look to try and find consensus between county executive and the county council. Sometimes that is not easy at all. Sometimes it just simply doesn't happen. But that adds a little bit more fabric to the job and to my job as well. So, but that's what's going on. And it's a new challenge every day, trying to manage those separate interests. Sometimes there's alignment, but lots of times there's different philosophical feelings on different issues.
I hadn't realized that was a unique structure for us in Montgomery County. And we'll come back to that in a second on where that you see that alignment this year, or where there are some potential areas of negotiation and further discussion. But
Right.
where does the school system fall within that? Because of course they're a large portion of our Montgomery County budget. Are they also part of your responsibilities in a sense that you have three bosses then, the exec, the council, and the school board, or do they have their own folks?
They have their own folks, and it's complicated because their person that represents them in Annapolis, and again, she's brand new. Last year they didn't have anybody. Represents the board, so that's a whole separate area. I mean, Montgomery County is complicated, and so that's all very complicated. But what we do out of my shop, because nobody cares. I mean, we are the bank for the school system. The county government is. In other states, school systems have the ability to tax. And so they are kind of self-operating, running their own financial system, everything. In Maryland, school systems are completely dependent on public sector money. And that is, a heavy burden for the county. As you mentioned, it's more than half of the county's budget. And so we have a very keen interest. I have a very keen interest in the financial operations of not the operations, but state aid for the public education system in Montgomery. So I will say that my shop, we have a lot of expertise in exactly how all those formulas work. And when it comes to changes of those, when it comes to the money of the school system, where it could impact the county government, if we don't bring home money, then that is one of our key priorities, that we follow that and engage in that. And the school system generally does. I mean, the school system is, I think they get that role for us. I mean, that's just what we do. We have long history in staffing a lot of these commissions and understanding all the intricacies of exactly how those formulas work. So
we're a little less than 2 months out from the start of the 90-day legislative session. Where do you see your team and you specifically putting your energies this year? And perhaps let's start first with areas that everyone's agreed these are going to be some of Montgomery County's priorities.
Well, so this year, and this is kind of unusual. I mean, we are a place like Montgomery County because I'm gonna, because of its relative wealth, and obviously the dynamics are shifting in the county, but it's still relative to other subdivisions is going to test as a very wealthy subdivision. And how does that test occur? It happens like what does your tax base look like? What do you have to tap for a tax base? And that kind of generally establishes where you fall on the scale of whenever the state is creating a formula they're going to wealth equalize. And the one formula I'm talking largely about is public K through 12 education. So, we don't spend a lot of time focusing on the money side of things on the operating side, but we feel like one of our best plays generally, outside of some policy initiatives that we're going to get involved in, is on the capital budget side. So this year, and this year's different. I mean, we've had 2 years at the state level, federal level, where there's been just largesse of available funds to fund one-time infrastructure investments. So for the past 2 years, the county's done exceedingly well on bringing home capital funds for infrastructure projects. We teed up a list again this year. I know that Brian was at the priorities hearing that took place on Monday night. That is another prioritized list of capital investments that we'd like to get state funding for. It's focused largely on transportation again. And one thing that's been kind of interesting, the last 2 years, our this is, it took me years to kind of come around to this. It's like, why don't we do better, in transportation funding, despite the fact that a lot of people, like someone like Mark Corman, who specializes in transportation funding, says like the county does actually exceedingly well in transportation. But the Maryland Department of Transportation, I think, always makes it very difficult for you to ever compare yourself to another subdivision on how you're doing. And this is something, when it comes to transportation investment in Montgomery, the rest of the state gets it. The Baltimore region, here I'm like talking to John, who lives in Baltimore, but, they avoid the Washington region like the plague. I think the Washington region goes to Baltimore. Baltimore does not, they rarely show up in Montgomery because they figure they can't get there, they can't get there from here. Mm-hmm. And because the transportation infrastructure is so deficient, and now is even, more complicated because of commuting patterns that have changed. So we feel like we have a really good shot at this, and we've had an extremely good shot because the last 2 years, it hasn't been just through the Transportation Trust Fund where the money is coming from. It's just from extra cash. And if you have to go through the Transportation Trust Fund to get transportation infrastructure funding, that is like a weird document. It runs kind of alongside the rest of the state budget. It gets all taken care of in the Department of Transportation. They hold these local meetings. They go back to their offices and they decide what you're going to get. And there's always been a gentleman's agreement in the state legislature. You don't open that document back up. So it just gets, whatever they decide, that's it. Because if you open it back up, everyone is going to start to, horse trade on that document. And so it just doesn't happen. So it's really restricted, I think, our delegates and senators, our state delegation, from playing in that game because the document's not allowed to be opened up. But the past 2 years, there's just been all this cash. So we've done I think, our delegation's done a really good job at bringing home a lot of transportation money. So we're going to try again this year. We've put together another aggressive list, like things like that's probably way aspirational. At the top of the list is $110 million for bus rapid transit. Burtonsville Park and Ride, another $2.5 million there. Zero emission ride-on and BRT bus depot, $50 million. Yes, when I say aspirational, I'm talking aspirational. The south entrance for the Bethesda Metro Station, $12 million. The north entrance, which is very important, although the county executive has some different feelings about the north entrance. He strongly feels like developers should be in there. The county council, and this is where we end up kind of in a split world, if the north entrance doesn't go on the list, the county council is going to ask for it to be. So we have another 18 million on for that list. You also know about the Institute for Health Computing. And we've got on that list too, another couple of $1 million to allow them to create a permanent home in the county. And so that's the core, but obviously there's big school construction assets like 237 million. I see Susan on the call. We always support Montgomery County or Montgomery College's projects. There's a couple of projects on there. And the numbers I've just kind of thrown out are in addition to amounts that have been pre-authorized in previous capital budget bills. So this is, where we're hoping to make progress. We also, go ahead. I think somebody's cutting in. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, and I was just going to ask in for any of those projects, is there a role or is it helpful for the business community to weigh in as well with our decision makers? And I'm thinking perhaps there's a company whose offices are along one of these BRT routes that would want to, participate in the advocacy.
It absolutely is important. And one reason why the north entrance, the Metro North entrance is as far along as it is, or particularly with lining up money, it's a very expensive project, has largely to do with the business community, and we appreciate this very much so. I mean, the county alone, there would not be these kind of numbers being delivered for a metro station project. So that is the business community in Montgomery that is busy talking to some of our key legislators about bringing home state funding for that project. Mm-hmm. And it goes along with the bus rapid transit and everything else that falls out. That the business community is incredibly important when it comes to a key priority of the county, which is transportation infrastructure, because we know what that means for economic development in the county if people can't move anywhere. They don't have options. Housing is, another major issue. We're asking for $10 million for the state to match our housing initiatives fund, just to leverage some more money for housing. But we are in a long list of counties that have severe housing issues. But we have that on there too, but this is heavily focused on transportation, as it has been in the past. The county council met yesterday, 2 days ago. We always do put out kind of a policy priorities document. Is it a heavy influencer with our state delegation? No, never. But we still feel an obligation to do it and make sure it is posted on our website that most people don't ever go to. On one hand, I was asked point blank in a council meeting, why do we do this document? Where I was, stumped for a second. And I said, if nothing else, it does provide my office as kind of a guidance of the types of issues that the county, the executive branch and the legislative branch do agree on that are important. And there's some things on there that are important. And one of them does have to do with the school system this year. And we're not going to be alone. There's going to be other county governments and the Maryland Association of Counties have this as a key priority, that given what we don't know about the blueprint, although extremely supportive, and Montgomery County is extremely supportive of its public K through 12 education system, or I should say, honestly, pre-K through 16, because we're very supportive of the community college system too. We know the value of this, and the county's willing to put their money where their mouth is. The county for MCPS, Montgomery County Public Schools, always exceeds its state mandated maintenance of effort requirement. But we have to know more about what's going on the financial front. There just has to be greater transparency. And the key is, what does transparency mean versus micromanaging a school system? But there are things that the numbers for the blueprint aren't even clear yet. But whether Montgomery County can make this type of commitment that will be mandated by state law, other counties are really going to struggle. So we just have to know more. I think one example that Mark Elrich uses lots of times is programs where a new program comes in, you fund it, and the next thing you know, you don't know anything about that program. Did it work? Did it not work? Did the money get reprogrammed to another, budget item? What happened? What just a little bit more information about what's going on, what's happened, what are these investments hitting pay dirt, are they not? Also the timing of the budgets. The school system comes out with their budget before the county knows what its revenue outlook is. And therefore it puts the county at a quick disadvantage as far as messaging, where the school system got out and, has, made very aggressive asks for financial commitments from the county. And then the revenue numbers come out and it's going to be a tremendous struggle. But meanwhile, there's been expectations set that the county is, can make that number. So just some things like that. I think that these are always, I've been involved in this, others, John has been involved in this, Bill's been involved in this before, where you kind of take a run at the school systems as far as just kind of knowing a little bit more what's going on, but that it's always difficult. You usually don't get much of what you want when you try and then, change, because it's always the issue of like, you're trying to micromanage a school system. And I would just say in the case of Montgomery, certainly have no intention, no desire to do the job that they do, but just need to have greater collaboration and more information about what's going on. And the public should also have the right to know this too.
Great.
So
No, if you have a chance before we end today to throw the link into your policy document statement into the chat, we'll make that a homework assignment for everyone, so that at least these 15-20 people have read it, and you can know that you can tell the council member the next time, well, the business community really to read our policy statement every year. I was intrigued by, you said this is one of those years where you're working with other counties that have the same concerns about transparency and their relationships with their school boards. One of the things that Suburban Hospitals, we work a lot in coalitions, certainly with the Maryland Hospital Association, the higher education community works in coalitions. Are there any sort of like-minded or similar counties that you try and benchmark to or pair up with when you need to?
So we always refer to the Big Eight. Those are our partners, and that's, Baltimore County, Baltimore City, Howard, Prince George's, Anne Arundel. Who am I missing in the Big Eight? We include Hartford. And there's never going to be, there's nothing like Montgomery. I'm going to say that. It is, I just consider it very unique in the state. I mean, Bill's heard me say this before. I go like, we live in California, and then there's the rest of the state. And we operate even very differently from our counterpart, Prince George's, who's also on the Washington. But Howard County is a third the size of Montgomery County, but we have things in common there. And Anne Arundel is starting to become more and more, a little bit more, it's a little bit more, starting to become bluer more than, dark purple or light blue. So I look at that. Baltimore County is someone that they are similar, they're similar size. They have a lot of things in common, but they're bordering Baltimore City. Baltimore City is a different animal in the Big Eight. They're a municipality, but a lot of the politics are shared. And so they're a key member. But when I think of where I'm going to probably reach out first, it's probably going to be Baltimore County, Howard, and Anne Arundel. And I would reach out to Prince George's County, but they have organized themselves differently over the past several years, and they don't maintain their traditional form of lobbying shop in Annapolis. So it has become kind of confusing who you talk to, or who is moving in the circles that the rest of the Big Eight's moving in, and where they have things in common and don't have them. But it's, you always go, this is another Washington subdivision. Would love to have a better working relationship with them. And And sometimes we do, I think at the agency level, there's a lot of, there are working relationships. But other times it's much, I'm just going to say that it's a lot more standoffish, particularly as it relates to Montgomery. I think that, sometimes when I have conversations with them, their perspective of us always surprises me. So I have to rethink lots of times about our relationship and how we can strengthen that relationship and team up on some things that I think matter to the Washington region, much more so than the rest.
Great. I have been doing a lot of talking, so I invite everyone again to start raising your hands or use the chat function. And speaking of the chat, there is a specific request from Keisha Powell at WSSC to talk with you, Melanie, about some ways to partner. I'm not going to put you on the spot and ask you to make that commitment now in front of everybody, but suggest the two of you have that conversation. But maybe, Keisha, if you have a chance to unmute and want to tell us what that capital ask is designated for, that would be helpful for everybody.
Thank you. And really not a specific ask to commit to. I understand that and wouldn't ask you to do that in this forum. But WSSC Water, as you know, is the service provider for Montgomery County and Prince George's County. We have a very large capital improvement program. And when you look at the amount of external funds that are available in the transportation sector and for transportation projects, water funding pales in comparison. And what we're up against here is the city of Baltimore, as you know, because of all of their challenges, have been getting the lion's share of the funding under the bill, as well as the base appropriations. This year, or just a couple of months ago, we were notified that there are actions being taken to significantly cut the amount of state revolving funds, to just cut the program, and that would have significant impacts, again, to the funding that is available for us. So we're always looking for strong partners to help in our advocacy efforts. I think it goes a long way to hear from communities and not just the utility, especially with the state, but also with our federal delegation. So I'm happy to follow up if you'd be amenable to meeting to provide more insights on our advocacy efforts in this next year and what our priorities are.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you so much. And we also are pursuing, and I just want to thank here openly Montgomery College, and has signed on to be a partner with us to pursue a workforce development grant under EPA. We're working to close the application and get it submitted this week. So that's something else that we'll share with the group once that application is submitted. Thank you, Gigi. Good to see you.
There's another question in the chat, Melanie, from Keisha's colleague, just asking, realizing that your priorities letter that we've talked a little bit about is still in draft form. When do you anticipate that'll be final?
I think by the end of the week.
Oh.
And I also just want to say that that Keisha, we of course always follow the bi-county legislation closely, and we're meeting with the county executive this afternoon to talk through the pieces of legislation that have to do with the WSS.
Okay, thank you so much. And we'll send you our list once that's finalized. We'll be sending that around.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Questions from the group? All right, Bill, you went on camera, so I'm going to call on you, which is to say, so as a former delegate, what else do we need to know about as members of the business community and working with Melanie's office?
I mean, incredibly talented, probably one of the most underappreciated assets the county government has. I mean, Mel's one of the most sophisticated, smart, strategic people in all of Annapolis, particularly on the fiscal things. You know, one area where she can help connect members is, is to some of the institutional players like Mako and MML. Some of your members may not, I mean, obviously Brian and Gigi know this world, but some of your members may not appreciate that there are whole institutions around county government and municipal government. So Melanie's well connected to those worlds and is someone who can sometimes leverage those assets for building support for ideas and issues.
Great, thank you.
She also has some of my favorite quotes that I go back to again and again. Pigs get fat and hogs get slaughtered is one of her best.
It's true. It's true.
Yeah, it doesn't. I always try to use that, Mel, and it doesn't come as good. It doesn't sound as compelling when it comes from me as it does from you.
I don't know. It's I've always just thought of it as a compelling one. It's called, the bad greed.
Mm-hmm. Actually, that was a favorite of a former boss of mine, so resonates with me too. One of the things, we've spent a lot of time talking about in Annapolis today, but of course, Mel, your office also handles federal intergovernmental relations.
We do.
And big news there, of course, last night about we seem to have averted the shutdown again. So what does, the county chamber, of course, is very involved with the federal government, Small Business Administration in particular, with some of our VIP program. How do you find your office getting involved at the federal level? And again, that question, how can the business community be helpful to you?
So Sarah Morningstar is the federal coordinator in the Office of Intergovernmental Relations. So I live vicariously through her, and I see Asham is on the call because the state moves quickly. I mean, things happen. The state, you show up in January, things happen or they don't happen, and the book gets closed on them, and you move on. And then the federal government, obviously behaves quite differently. Although we're very pleased to see what happened last night, because we do have, well, I'm just going to say they're earmarks. We have earmarks out there that we hope are going to come through. Some of those were developed with the business community. And we have constant other issues outside of financial that we end up being involved in on they pop up and, they become a substantial issue. And I will say that the congressional delegation staff that we work with, they're excellent. They are unbelievably responsive. They get on it. I don't know if you're aware, with our kind of battles of ARPA-H, the location of ARPA-H, that we desperately want to be located in Montgomery County. That is a huge battle right now. And our congressional delegation has been on that, which we totally appreciate. The migrant issues, obviously we're accepting a lot of people that are coming out of the southern borders here in the county. We don't talk about it a lot, but we do have a facility where we accept those people, and the congressional delegation has been very helpful with us there. We have FEMA issues related to that. So we've got, in addition to kind of the financial end, which I always pay a lot of attention to, there's just things that pop up all the time that require us to interact with the federal government. And I know that happens with you too. I know that, your veterans programs and things like that are incredibly well respected. And, we always look to partner on anything and join in efforts on anything that you're working on, and we're glad to tap you for anything that we would need help with the congressional delegation too on the federal front.
It does look like that spurred a question from Tammy at Comcast, about things to work on together. So Tammy, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much for the question, for the opportunity to ask the question. Thank you very much for hosting this event today. Alongside my colleagues at WSSC, we are very mindful of this once in a lifetime opportunity that we have with historic amounts of funding with BEAD relative to infrastructure for broadband. When you talked about partnering and federal issues, the one thing that it brought to mind for us is we're very mindful as we look at issues of addressing the digital divide, one of the most important tools that we've had to address the barrier of affordability for families with internet is the Affordable Connectivity Program, which is a federal subsidy that families receive. And working with Montgomery County, who has been a wonderful partner in addressing digital divide issues, we've been able to leverage raising awareness about the Affordable Connectivity Program in an effort to get internet to more under-resourced groups within the county. And as we sort of navigate this weird space with the federal government, in terms of how long they will continue to support things like the Affordable Connectivity Program, and at the state level, how much interest there would be in continuing to support efforts like the Emergency Broadband Benefit, which in Maryland offers families an additional $15 on top of the $30 from the federal subsidy. So you're really looking at a situation where a lot of Maryland families are having access to free internet. I say all that to come back to, we're certainly happy to share our information and our resources on these programs, on our success in Maryland and at the county level as well, with raising awareness about the ACP, how many families are supported by the ACP. But we would hope there would be some continued effort on the part of the county with our federal partners and our state partners to advocate for those resources for the people that need them.
Absolutely. And I should say that, next month we'll start working on our federal priorities again for the upcoming year. So we should talk about that. We should make sure that some of these things get on that list and we, seriously make a play for them. And I'm sure you probably do work with our TEBS people and Mitzi Herrera, likely, who we work with closely on a lot of these issues when it comes to the federal.
Yeah, Montgomery County's really been a model for the state on these issues of digital equity. So we're grateful for Mitzi and the county.
Yep. Thank you.
Brian, I saw you come off mute.
Yeah, I sort of had a comment and a question. I mean, it's sort of like the first one's a comment / question. I think, your role in Montgomery County is so unique, working for the executive and the legislative branch in a sense. I think of you quite often as you went from 9 clients in the county council to 11. I just was wondering how that was going. Is it 15% more work or maybe less or maybe more? And then I had a question about the property tax. I'm just wondering if you could look into your crystal ball. We had quite an interesting discussion at the county council and the county executive level. The county executive had proposed a 10% property tax increase. I think it ended up at 4.7 cents or percent. And it's, they may have to do it again, or they may propose it again. I was wondering what your crystal ball told you about that.
Well, I'm trying to think. First, 9 to 11, meetings are going to go longer. And so the clerk of the council should always consider that. The council, it's 11 very, very, very dedicated public servants, but there's a divide I found it very interesting to watch this new council vis-a-vis others. There's obvious philosophical divides about issues, but they engage. They've been with each other now for a year, so they're starting to know each other well. We're starting to know them a little better. We didn't know them at all the first of last year, and we had lots of fits and starts. We had a couple pieces of legislation where there were stark divides between the county executive and county council. So we learned how to navigate that, and we learned a lot about the new members. But add 2 people, well, you're gonna have longer meetings.
Yeah, and the majority of the council is in their first year, 6 out of 11. So.
That's right. Yeah. And then the second question, I do not have a crystal ball. I don't know. I think, I have paid more attention to kind of the capital side of how things are teeing up in the county as far as those budgets, and not so much the operating. So I have no crystal ball. I don't know. I did follow the property tax issue last year because I thought it was relevant to the Annapolis scene. And I, watched a lot of strife. I mean, a lot of things happened this year. I mean, that pretty substantial property tax increase, rent control, which is something that I was very surprised sitting in Annapolis to see that type of a play and for that to pass. But no, I don't. I think we have some ideas. The school system will be coming in with another very aggressive budget number. And I'm glad I don't manage I'm glad I'm not the director of the Office of Management and Budget in Montgomery County, because my job might be tough sometime, and then there's that, where it's always hard to not spend $1.25 for every dollar you bring in. And every county struggles with that, and Montgomery County struggles with that mightily, because they have strong commitments to the public education system and strong commitments to social services. And it takes a lot of commitment and a lot of money to manage all of that.
Thank you, Melanie.
Spoken truly like someone with a finance background, and we would expect no less. We promise to have everybody out in just a few minutes. Are there any other questions for Melanie? Going once. All right. Well, Melanie, thank you again for taking the time with us this morning. You can tell there's a high degree of respect for what you do and how you represent not only the county, but in turn represent all of us in Annapolis. So thank you. We apologize for giving you some homework, but I hope those discussions are productive. If some of our members here today who have some specific issues with your office. Brian already went through our next couple of meetings. We don't have any big gatherings for a while. So as we all turn our attention to family and friends. And so I will wish all of you a happy Thanksgiving and safe travels. Whoops, wait a second. I see Bill's hand up before I close out here. So
that was me giving applause to Melanie.
All right, great. Thank you. But I will wish all of you, if you have to, since we talked about transportation, if next week finds you and your family members on the road, I wish you all safe travels, and we will look forward to seeing you at our meeting in December.
Thanks for having me, and my door's always open. So please reach out. Anything that we can do to help, anything that we can do better, just reach out.
Great.
Well said, Leslie, and thank you, Melanie, as always.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Have a great
Thank
morning.
you.